This is a moral assault on our democracy. And we need to look back at history when things like this have happened before, the internment of the Japanese, the fugitive slave patrols, which is what this has felt like. And then looking back at the civil rights movement and having nonviolent direct action, civil disobedient protests, it is so extremely important that we protest. There is no way, because see, part of what they're doing is they're trying to normalize military intervention. They're experimenting with all of our cities. So should they need to have martial law, should they need to cancel an election, well, okay, the military. I mean, this has never happened in our country before. And so I think it is absolutely critical that we fight back, but we must do it nonviolently, because what they want is to provoke us into violence, so then they have an excuse to bring in the military.
That's exactly
We
right.
should not help them do that.
Welcome to At Our Table. I'm your host, Jamie Harrison, and we're coming to you from the great city of Los Angeles. Today, I am so excited to be joined by one of my all-time favorite mayors, the 43rd mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass. She's the first Black woman to lead our country's second largest city, but she's been breaking glass ceilings even before getting elected in 2022. She's the first Black woman to serve as Speaker of a state legislative body, which she did here in California. She served more than a decade in Congress, and she was a chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. In 2020, she was on President-elect Biden's shortlist for vice president. Before turning to politics, she was an activist and worked as a physician's assistant in emergency medicine. But probably her most important titles are mom and grandma. Mayor Bass has been on the front lines of combating federal overreach and wildfire response, and so much more. Recently, she said that mayors and city leaders are the last line of defense for American democracy, and I completely agree. I'm excited to dig into what it has been like to lead Los Angeles through significant moments, both publicly and personally, and what she sees as the role of mayors in our big cities at this time. Mayor Bass, welcome to At Our Table. I am so excited to see you, one, and I'm so excited to be here in Los Angeles. Your city, you are the mayor, and you've been doing such amazing things. But before we start talking about you being mayor, I want to talk about you, Karen Bass, and you grew up right here in Los Angeles. So what was it? What was a young Karen Bass like?
Well, first of all, I am so glad you're here. So welcome to Los Angeles.
Thank you.
And it is great to see you. I haven't seen you in quite a while.
Yeah.
And so welcome.
Thank you. And the weather's great because when I got on a plane from South Carolina to fly here, they had to de-ice the plane in South Carolina, right? And then I walk out the plane here, and I'm like, man, this is nice.
That's right, and it's 80 degrees. So yes,
Exactly.
this is Los Angeles. But yes, born and raised here, and this is just such an incredible city. We are so big, so spread out, so vast, and so diverse. But a young Karen Bass was interested in activism from childhood.
Wow.
And so
Were your parents like activists?
No, my parents did not want anything to do with activism, not at all, and did not want their daughter doing this.
Oh, boy.
But I will tell you, the only reason was because, back in those days, they were just afraid for me. That's all. It wasn't about they didn't agree or anything like that. I mean, that was, during the time of the ending of the civil rights movement and moving into the Black Power movement. And there were a lot of people being hurt, going to prison, losing their lives. And so they didn't really want their daughter going in that direction. But like young people, that's exactly what I did.
Yeah. Was there a moment for you that just, that triggered this interest? Again, because your parents aren't, focused on it.
My dad was a letter carrier, and my mom was a homemaker for a business, took care of other kids and did other things at home.
And so was there something on television? Was there something that happened in LA that just like turned the light on for you to say, you know what, I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to get involved?
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
I started as a child watching the news with my father. My father was from Texas. My mother was a rare African American that was actually born in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
Because we didn't really move here until after World War II. And my mother was born way before that. And my father came over with the traditional migration. But watching the news and watching the civil rights movement and not understanding what was going on at all, especially the civil disobedience, watching people who I thought were old, of course they were teenagers and students, being attacked in the South was very confusing to me. And so my father would explain to me what the South was like, what I call apartheid, because it was U.S. apartheid.
Yeah.
You can call it Jim Crow if you want. It is Jim Crow, but it was also apartheid. And as a matter of fact, when the South Africans were setting up apartheid, they went to the South to learn about Jim Crow so that they could apply it in their country.
Wow. Wow. And so then you decided that you wanted to go into medicine, right? So you were active as a young person.
Jamie, you know what? Nobody told me activism was a job.
Well, now it is, right?
Back then, nobody was paid to be an activist.
You couldn't pay the rent.
No. And I was always interested in the human body. I was always interested in science. And so, yes, I went into the medical field because then I never had to worry about a job because you could always be employed. So I could work during the day, but do what my heart was about after work and on the weekends. And so the majority of my life I spent in the medical field and after work as an activist, but I mainly was involved in community activism. I was involved in electoral politics as a young kid as well. I was involved in Bobby Kennedy's presidential run.
Wow.
And I signed my mother up to be the precinct captain. She never knew that, but I went out and I knocked on the doors and talked to my neighbors.
You did the work.
Yes, I did the work.
It was her name on the list.
Yes, but those times were very traumatic. So I worked for Bobby Kennedy. I should have been there at the Ambassador Hotel that night that he was assassinated, but I was a child.
Yeah.
So I was at home in bed on radio because we didn't have 24-hour news. I was listening to it. So I heard the assassination take place.
How did that impact you,
It
though?
Fundamentally changed my life, basically, because remember, it was just a couple of months after Martin Luther King was killed.
Exactly right.
During that time, the Panther Party and other organizations were coming along. People were being killed all over the place. And it basically led me to lose faith in the system, which is why I never went down the road of electoral politics. I stayed focused on community-based issues, whether we were dealing with police community relations. I was also always interested in the world. So it was the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, but then there was the anti-apartheid movement. There were the struggles that were going on in Central America, in Asia, in Africa, and in other countries in Latin America. And I was very, very much interested in all of that.
And then you decided, okay, I am going to run for office.
Well, that was actually decades later.
2003, right?
Yes, it was 2003, but in the 80s and 90s, well, in the 80s when crack cocaine hit and when AIDS hit, we had a terrible problem here with the Crips and the Bloods. We had 1,000 homicides in 1 year. At that point, I was working in the emergency room in the trauma center, so I was seeing people come in. But I was also full-time faculty at the medical school. And that's, again, my day job. At night, I was involved in trying to free Nelson Mandela. And at a certain point in time, I said, well, I want Nelson Mandela to be freed and apartheid to end, and it happened. And then I felt the contradiction of I'm focusing on South Africa when my own community around me was in a crisis. And so I made a conscious decision to stop doing international work and to focus on the domestic work. I walked away from my very cush university faculty job and went to the epicenter of where the violence and the drug problem was. And I started a community-based organization, and that was 35 years ago. And I'm happy to say that the organization is still thriving. And one of the focuses of the organization was to try to recruit and train the next generation of leaders and activists. And so I'm also proud to say that the current president of our city council was from that organization.
Wow, that's great.
And as a matter of fact, there's several people in my administration now
Who
that,
also went through.
well, they were 14 and 15 years old. They
Wow.
were high school students. So the work that we're doing on homelessness, the leadership of that work were two young women who we recruited when they were 14, and now they're leading that work, and they're in their late 40s.
So what compelled you to then run for the state assembly here in
Well, after I spent 14 years building the organization, and my
Mhm.
goal was to recruit the staff, train the staff, but work my way out of a job. That's
Mhm.
what a true organizer does, because you want to turn it over to the people, and I wanted to turn it over to the next generation. When that was satisfied and I was older and my tolerance level was higher, I felt that I could handle being in elected office.
Mhm.
And so what I realized most important to me is that I could run for an office and work on the exact same issues that
Mhm.
I was working on in the community. But since the community piece was covered, I could go up and work on the legislative piece. So I went to Sacramento and I served 3 terms because that's all I could do.
Mhm.
In my last term, I was elected Speaker of the House, and unfortunately, during that time, it was in the Great Recession. So something about me, I go and I get in these leadership positions, and everything falls apart. Anyway, so that's when I was in Sacramento, I worked on criminal justice reform. I worked on foster care issues because we were fighting the laws to criminalize people. We didn't have the language of mass incarceration at the time,
Mhm.
but we saw it coming. We tried to fight the laws. We weren't successful. So I went up to Sacramento, and then I was working on laws around recidivism to prevent people from reoffending. Because when politicians, in a very opportunistic way, every politician wanted to say that they passed a get tough on
They're
crime
tough
law.
on crime, but
What they didn't realize was they passed so many laws that they basically criminalized people after they left. It
Wow.
used to be in our society, if you offended society and did your time, paid your debt, you were accepted back into society.
you could start over.
What politicians did is they blocked the ability of people to start over, which then just contributes to crime.
Yeah, it makes
Because,
the problem worse.
well, if you lock people out of the legal economy, people will survive by any means
That's
necessary.
exactly right.
And sometimes that means robbing your house.
People will find a way.
Exactly.
Yeah, people will find a way. Well, then, and I met you when you became a member of Congress.
Right.
And then shortly thereafter, you also became the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus.
That's right.
You were one heck of a chair of the
Thank you.
CBC. We've had some great members of chairs, and you were one of the great chairs
Thank
of
you.
the CBC.
I appreciate that.
You really moved the needle and was a force. For many of our listeners, you may not know, but in Congress, they call the Congressional Black Caucus the conscience of the Congress.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And it really was. And during your time, like, you were very, very tough on the things that were important to the Black community and making sure you represented this Black folks in this nation. And so,
And COVID hit.
and COVID hit.
Right.
Yes. And COVID hit. But also at the same time, you coming off of your chairmanship, we had a presidential election in 2020, and you were on the short list for vice president.
I was.
How a lot of folks don't know what that means to be on the short list as vice president. Can you explain a little bit about your experience being on the short list?
Sure. It means having your life put under a national microscope and anything and everything that you were involved in being examined. It was the honor of a lifetime.
Yeah.
I was so honored to be invited in the process. And frankly, I was very pleased with the decision and the outcome. I think selecting Kamala Harris as the vice presidential candidate was the right thing to do. I was very supportive of her. But going through the process was exciting. It was pretty scary, too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people learned about parts of my life that they didn't know about.
Well, and then you decided, after you went through that process, that you wanted to leave Congress and become mayor. And I can tell you, Madam Mayor, I always thought that you were first Black woman Speaker of the House here, but I thought that you were primed to probably be the first Black Speaker of the House in Washington, D.C. as well. Just your knowledge and your intellect, your charisma, and all that you bring to it. But you decided to leave Washington, D.C. to come back home to L.A.
Well, that was not an easy decision. I have to tell you that while I was in D.C., I was still working on the same issues.
Yeah.
I was working on criminal justice reform. I was working on foster care. But the beauty of Congress that I love the most is that I was able to work on international issues as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though years before I was working on South Africa, never thinking I'd be able to actually go to South Africa and to be able to head up Africa policy for the House of Representatives was also an incredible honor. But I was called home because we had the crisis in our city again. And frankly, Jamie, I was flashing back to the 90s. I was flashing back. Here it was again. We had a crisis where our people were getting ready to be criminalized.
Yeah.
And Black people in the United States, in Los Angeles, a lot of people don't realize that, we're 3.8 million people. 9% of the population is African American. Just 9%.
Just 9%.
That's all. But we're over 30% of the people who are living and dying on our streets.
Wow.
And we have over 40,000 people on our streets who were unhoused. And that compelled me to come back because I was afraid that the individuals that were running was going to lead us backwards in that path of criminalization. It wasn't easy. There had to be a significant amount of pressure locally for me to make this decision. But ultimately, I decided that the best place for me to serve was here.
So now you've been mayor for a few years. You've been in Congress. How does being mayor compare to being a member of Congress?
Well, let me just tell you, I am so grateful that I served on the state level and the congressional level because they are all interrelated.
Yeah.
And one thing that I was surprised about my city is that the city, for whatever reason, is kind of siloed. The city doesn't necessarily think about Sacramento or Washington, D.C., so I've been able to bring that perspective. And what I found out right away is one of the reasons we have so many people who are homeless is because of bad policies on the state level and on the federal level. So I've had to be very involved in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. as mayor.
When you started your term as mayor, did you have specific priorities or the things that benchmarks that you set for yourself that you wanted to achieve during your tenure?
100%.
And then where are you in terms of meeting those benchmarks?
Sure. My number 1, 2, and 3 issue was really affordability. And the most extreme manifestation of how unaffordable our city has become is homelessness. And so when I came in, when I was sworn in, instead of going to City Hall, I actually went to our emergency management department, put the city in a state of emergency. I declared an emergency over homelessness, and I set out to get people off our streets. And we've been able to do that. And for 2 consecutive years, we have reduced the number of people on the street. And it's the first time we've had a reduction in street homelessness. Now,
say that again so that people, because, sometimes the people in the back, they weren't listening. I want you to say that again, of what you have achieved in the last 2 years.
We have been getting people off the streets. So the first time for 2 years in a row, we've had a decline in street homelessness.
Wow, congratulations.
We still have too many people on the street, but if you had come here 3 years ago, there were tents everywhere.
Yeah.
And people literally set up these street communities like you would see overseas in a developing country. And that's what is happening here. Do you know that at any given morning, 3 to 4 people don't wake up? They die on these
streets.
the
streets.
Yes.
Wow. Again, I want to applaud you for the hard work and the effort because I know that that's not easy. I mean, it is not easy to do that and to build a system and an infrastructure in order to bring that down. Are there any unique things that you have done in order to address homelessness?
Well, I think what you would be shocked about are some of the policies that literally make people homeless. So let me give you one.
Let me
give you an extreme example.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if you were a veteran and you took your disability benefits and other benefits, we counted that as your income and then said you were ineligible for housing.
Oh, God.
So we literally had 3,000 unused vouchers. We had the vouchers to house veterans, but wouldn't give them the vouchers because we were counting their benefits as income. So it took me a year and a half. But again, because I understood the federal side, I started getting active nationally in the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I chair the National Committee on Homelessness. We took 50 mayors to D.C. We went to the House, we went to the Senate, we went to the White House, and we were able to get the Treasury Department and HUD to change that policy. Now we're down to 1,200 vouchers. We're going to restart the campaign in January. We want to use all of our vouchers, which should essentially end homelessness for veterans.
Wow.
That's
huge.
It's the intersection between the policies and the people on the street. The conventional wisdom is that people are on the street because they're mentally ill or drug addicts. And okay, there's a lot, that's true. But let me ask you this. If you slept on these streets for 3 weeks, do you think your mental health would be the same?
No, hey, you're right.
Do you think you might use drugs? There's a lot of people who use methamphetamine to stay awake so that they are not assaulted at night. You do that for a few weeks and pretty soon you're addicted. So it is a very complex situation that people look at and minimize and just say, well, those people are on the street because it's their fault. Do you know that we make young people homeless by policy? If you are a foster youth and you turn 18 or 21, we shut you off. And we literally put you on the street. We know your name. We know your address. We were responsible for you until you were 18 or 21. And all of our little middle-class kids that got everything they ever needed, if they couldn't text us and have ATM cards from us, none of them could survive when they were 18.
It is so true.
How on earth do you think an 18-year-old without a family is supposed to survive on these streets?
With no support.
No support. And we do that by policy.
You know, just talking to you today, it's one of those things that I when I worked on the Hill for Congressman Clyburn, did you see policy and people rushed to get it done? They rushed to pass it. And then once it's passed or once it's done, they don't think about what happens afterwards.
Exactly.
There's no evaluation of the impact. There's no like, what is the humanity around these things? You know, one of the things I tried to talk with some of the staff at the White House about was, you know, as someone who grew up low income, grew up in housing projects and communities and saw what housing policy would do in terms of the separation of families, of Black families. You have a boyfriend, girlfriend, they end up having a baby. The boyfriend has a little side hustle job or whatever. The girlfriend gets aid for herself and the baby. But as soon as the boyfriend can't be listed on the apartment, because if he is, then she stops getting housing allowances, right? And so you have to separate the family, or they have to hide in order to the fact that he's there. And that just is so nonsensical to me. Like, if you want to have a sliding scale that says, well, if you got this amount of income, then we reduce your amount of your voucher by this much. But keep the family together. And I don't know why we don't sit back and actually, I wish we'd spend more time evaluating the laws that we have.
Well, I'm a politician, so I can criticize my other politician colleagues. And that is one of my biggest pet peeves, that people care about getting the policy passed because it's something that they can check off and campaign for, and they don't care about the implication of the policy, and they don't evaluate it exactly like you said. To me, I care about it all the way through. And I look back, and I've made mistakes and had to make changes in policies because what I thought was working had a loophole, and somebody came to exploit that loophole.
Exactly.
And so I needed to change it. But what you just described is the system that keeps people poor.
Yes.
You essentially say...
That's exactly right.
And then we turn around, especially when it comes to Black families, and criticize the family. How come you have all women in charge of households? Well, by policies, because you've run off the men.
That's exactly right. I also want to talk to you. I know one of the things that you have been dealing with and your leadership, and I want to applaud your leadership on, and you got hit with all the critiques and criticism was on the fires.
Right.
Like, anybody who's known about California and LA knows that there are fires that happen here. I mean, when you're in the middle of dry land and there's little water, and if there's a wildfire, then it's going to impact the place. Tell us about how you have led the city in terms of rebuilding after these fires. And we know that one day again, there will be fires again. This is not
Exactly.
something that is, that you created or anything. It's the natural inclination of being in a place like this.
Well, it is, but it's also because of climate change.
Yes.
And so what is happening around our country is areas are having climate events that they don't know anything about. I mean, it is 80 degrees. We don't really do big weather in this city.
Mhm.
We had hurricane strength winds in our city, something that we've never experienced before.
Because then the fires are going, and you could see the sparks
Right.
in the air because the wind was just carrying.
Well, it was hurricanes with no water.
Yes.
100-mile-an-hour force
Wow.
winds. And so that was one reason. But there were multiple reasons for the fires.
Yeah.
And so I will tell you that now, almost 1 year later, if you look at Hawaii right now, those fires were 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and they have about 300 homes that are being rebuilt. We have more than 300 homes being rebuilt in the Palisades right now.
Wow.
Now, having said that, it's the holidays. People are still out of their homes.
Mm.
It doesn't make anybody feel wonderful for me to sit here and tell you that this is one of the fastest recovery and rebuilding efforts that the state of California has ever seen. And I'm proud of that, but I do have to acknowledge the grief, the suffering, and the pain that people have gone through. But I will tell you, Jamie, the most difficult part of this, because of social media right now and because of opportunistic individuals, the fact that people have deliberately put out misinformation, and let me call it to what it is, lies about what is and isn't happening. And so some of the lessons that I learned around homelessness, because the other way we're addressing homelessness, by the way, is expediting the rebuilding of affordable housing and cutting red tape and changing bureaucracy. We took those lessons, we've applied them in the Palisades. And by the way, let me also say, the only area where the fires were impacted in the city of Los Angeles is the Pacific Palisades. Malibu is a separate city. Altadena is a separate region. It is not in the city of Los Angeles.
Well, and that's really, really important.
Right,
Really important
because a
for
lot
folks
of
to
people
understand.
are confused when they only hear me talk about the Palisades.
Yeah. What are some lessons for other Americans who might not live in LA, who may not live on the West Coast, who may not live in a big city when it comes to these type of wildfires? What are some of the things that, again, you said there's so much misinformation's out there.
Right. But I would make it more general.
Yeah.
I would say that we as a nation and frankly as a planet, because we have not been responsible with our environment, we have to prepare ourselves for extreme weather events that we would have never thought about. I think about the floods that are happening right now in the Pacific Northwest. We see hurricanes happening at strengths that we had not seen before. So I don't think it's just fires. I think it's all extreme events like that, whether it's fires, floods, mudslides, I mean, you name it.
And it's only going to get worse given the federal leadership that we have right now and just destroying the positive things that I think the Biden administration had put in place in order to try to mitigate the climate crisis.
But that's one thing I'm really proud of about Los Angeles and California. Climate change is our way of life. It is not a controversy. As a matter of fact, just last week, I had a press conference celebrating the fact that Los Angeles, and it might be the only city in the country, I'm not sure, that has no dependency on coal at all.
Wow.
Something that took 20 years to happen, but we have no coal that is involved in our energy supply at all. We have one of the nation's largest solar farms. It's actually several miles away from LA, but it's in the desert. But that supplies electricity for over 200,000 homes. So climate change is embraced. We have a plan to be carbon free in another 10 years. And it is a big commitment of our state and our city. However, we're part of the country. And until we have an administration, until Democrats take over both houses of Congress and the White House, we're going to continue to have these weather events. And unfortunately, the federal government is not going to be helpful until we have new residents on Pennsylvania Avenue.
I want to talk a little about another man-made crisis, which is what has been happening here in LA and other big cities, democratic cities, with ICE coming into the city. Tell me about the moment when you learned that ICE was in LA, I guess, over these past summer.
This is a city of immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles is just about 50% Latino.
Yes.
Majority being from Mexico, but millions also being from Central America.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was at a joyful press conference, ribbon cutting for a new train station, for our subway system. And I got word that raids were happening all over the city. Now, we've seen immigration enforcement for years, but nothing like what we saw here. And I knew immediately that we were the petri dish. I knew they were experimenting with us because we are as blue as you can be. And I figured that if they could break our city, if they could divide our city, then they could go anywhere. But if you could imagine what felt like mass kidnappings happening all over the city, cars speeding down the street, unmarked cars, regular cars, some without license plates, men swooping out with
Masked
completely masked, very dubious-looking uniforms. Looks like they got them from Amazon.
Wow.
Lit with rifles, literally snatching people off the street, throwing them in the car. We had no way of knowing who was taken, where they were. They weren't allowed to have contact with their families. This happened around graduation time, so you had families not wanting to go to graduation. That's such a significant milestone in a family's life.
Think how scarred some of those kids had to be.
Exactly. And by the way, a number of these kids, especially the older teens, had been through COVID.
Yes.
And the older ones had been through the first Trump administration, where they might have been in elementary school afraid to go to school because they didn't know whether or not their parents would be home when they went home. You have areas of our downtown that are completely empty, our ghost towns like our fashion district, our flower district. You have restaurants that say this is worse than COVID because at least in COVID, you could drop off and pick up food. People wouldn't leave their homes. So there is still a reign of terror, by the way, that still exists. So it's not in the headlines right now, but people are still being captured, chased through Home Depots, snatched out of car washes. So this continues to go. But we are blessed in this city with a very strong immigrant rights infrastructure, organizations that have existed for 40 years. And so we knew how to organize. We knew how to fight back. Jamie, we had 4,000 National Guard troops here. And there was 4,700 Marines. And by the way, nothing was going on. Okay, we had some protests. You want to know the protests, in my opinion, equaled a Laker championship plus.
Yes.
You know what happens after a championship,
exactly
right?
Yes.
A few knuckleheads hang around. They're drunk. They start vandalizing things. There was no riot here. Los Angeles is 500 square miles. The protest was maybe 1 square mile in the downtown area. So the majority of the city didn't even know anything was happening. That warrants 4,000 troops. So I think of the National Guard. These are volunteers, young men and women who were ordered to leave their school, their workplace, their families for a political stunt. They were housed several miles outside of the city playing video games.
Wow.
The Marines kind of drove through the city now and then, but they weren't even involved in the protest. We had enough police and then the local police around. We had no need for the National Guard or the Marines. And by the way, a big victory. The court said, why do you still have National Guard in LA?
In LA.
They need to go home. But it's important to recognize that the President of the United States seized power from the governor and federalized the National Guard. The governor is in charge of the National Guard.
Did he ever call you? Anybody from the White House ever called you to say?
Did who call me? No.
It really just boggles my mind. What has happened here? What has happened in D.C.? I mean, I talked to the mayor in Charlotte. Even in Charlotte, North Carolina, they're doing all of these types of things. We saw in Chicago. A number of these cities also have a commonality. They all have black mayors.
No. Let's be clear. When the president listed the cities he was going to go after, every single one had a black mayor. Portland was a little bit of a diversion, a little bit in Boston. The cities he named in the beginning all had African-American mayors. But let me make a distinction between the mayors, because it is one thing to be a mayor in California or in Illinois or in Maryland, because we are Democratic states. I feel for my colleagues who are Democratic mayors in southern states, in Republican states. I can say certain things, I can act a certain way in my state, but in Republican states, my African-American colleagues who are mayors cannot take the same stance that we are taking here. They thought they were going to break and fracture our city. Our city stood strong. There was not
unified coalition
There was
of
not
people.
one part of our city that fractured and said they supported the president.
You know, you said, I'm quoting you here, you said, what we are living through is one of the great civil rights and human rights struggles of our time.
Right.
What can average people do to push back against this authoritarianism that we're seeing right now?
I always look at history, and I think that this is a moral assault on our democracy. And we need to look back at history when things like this have happened before, the internment of the Japanese, the fugitive slave patrols, which is what this has felt like. And then looking back at the civil rights movement and having nonviolent direct action, civil disobedient protests, it is so extremely important that we protest. There is no way, because see, part of what they're doing is they're trying to normalize military intervention. They're experimenting with all of our cities. So should they need to have martial law, should they need to cancel an election, well, okay, the military. I mean, this has never happened in our country before. And so I think it is absolutely critical that we fight back, but we must do it nonviolently, because what they want is to provoke us into violence, so then they have an excuse to bring in the military.
That's exactly
We
right.
should not help them do that.
Let's talk about some more positive stuff. What's coming up in L.A.?
Oh, my God, everything. What isn't coming up in L.A.?
Olympics?
Olympics, that's 3 years. Listen, in 2 months, we have the All-Star basketball game.
Yes.
In May, we have the U.S. Open for golf for women. In June, we have 8 games of the World Cup, and the World Cup is going to last 40 days.
Wow.
In 2027, we have the Super Bowl. In 2028, we have the Olympics and the Paralympics. We don't need anything else.
Folks, LA is going to be, it's already hot, but it's really going to be hot. So you got so many people from around the world coming right here in LA.
Exactly. And given that the world is already here, because
Yes.
I don't think that there is a country that would come here that's diaspora is not already here.
That's exactly
So we're ready to welcome the world.
It's a wonderful city. I don't know. I think you remember that I'm a big Lakers fan.
Yes.
So I am so high on the Lakers right now.
Okay, you're going to be here in February?
Oh, you know what? I need to find an excuse. February is my birthday month.
Okay.
I will be turning 50.
Oh,
and so maybe I can
youngster.
Yeah, maybe I can convince my wife to give me a birthday gift to allow me to come here for the All-Star game.
Well, she's welcome too.
Yeah,
bring
but,
your children.
The boys would really love it. The boys would really love it. I'm a huge Lakers fan, so I told somebody at dinner the other night, and they asked, "Well, Jamie, you're from South Carolina. How are you a Lakers fan?" And I said, "Well, because growing up, with my mom, single mom, she had the biggest crush on Magic Johnson, and so we would watch NBA and." We would only watch the Lakers. And so I just started watching the Lakers. But I was, when Magic and Kareem and Michael Cooper and, Byron Scott.
Do you know Magic?
So I have never met Magic.
You've never met Magic?
But when I ran for the U.S. Senate, he sent out a tweet endorsing me.
Yeah.
Mayor, I can't tell you. When Magic announced that he had HIV, I think it was in 91.
Yeah.
I was in middle high school. And at that time, HIV announcements were it's a death sentence.
Right.
I didn't go to school the next day.
Wow.
I was so devastated that I did not go to school the next day. But Magic Johnson is my all-time favorite.
Let me tell you a funny Magic story.
Yes.
So Magic in the 90s bought movie theaters in South Central, by the way. It was like a really big deal. We had these movie theaters. Do you know he would show up and serve popcorn? So
What?
you might go to the movie one day and Magic might be
there's
behind
6'9" Magic Johnson, point guard, passing you your popcorn.
But he is so much a part of this city. He is so beloved. But one of the reasons why he's so beloved is because he's so accessible.
Yeah.
You know, he's a big, big, big supporter of mine, and we just love him.
You're also running for re-election.
I am.
You're up in 26?
I am.
26 is going to be a big year for Democrats. That big blue wave is going to be coming across the East Coast and the country.
And we need it to wave over here.
And we need it to wave on you. We need you to be riding that wave as well.
That's right.
Mayor, you've done a really wonderful, wonderful job. And I want you to know that whatever I can do to be helpful to you in your reelection, LA needs you to be back in as mayor. And we need to do everything possible. What is any closing thing that you would want people to know about why you should be reelected? I know why.
I am not finished.
Yes.
I think that we have gotten thousands of people off the street. We have thousands more to do, but it is so important to unify the city, to prepare LA to welcome the world, and I want to be there to do that.
Another thing that was mentioned, and then I have our closing that I want. Hopefully, your team has told you about a special award that we give out.
Oh,
here
no,
on the
they
show.
did not.
Oh, okay. well, I'll bring you up to speed on it. It's a fun award. There's no pressure. But the sale of Warner Brothers.
Yes.
I wanted to talk to you about it because this is where all movies are made, right? This is the heart of entertainment. What is the impact of that going to be?
Well, I mean, I think what is happening right now, of course, is a battle between giants.
Yes.
And so we will see how that works out. But the entertainment industry in every aspect is going through fundamental structural change.
Yeah.
Part of it because of technology, part of it because of the economy. And so all of that is going to come into play. But my focus has been doing anything and everything I can to make it easier to film in LA.
Yes.
Because I think one of our problems here, it is so much a part of our DNA that we've taken it for granted. And a number of other states have come and...
I mean, Atlanta is trying to...
I know.
I don't know if you talk to the mayor down there, be like, hey, you better keep your hands off.
He's my friend, but...
Well, listen, I've enjoyed coming out here to LA and enjoyed talking to some of so many of the entertainers that are here that have been helpful in campaigns in the past. And you're right. It's a part of the DNA here, and it needs to continue to thrive and flourish. Now, one of the things that we do on the show, we have a special award that we present. It's called the Sit Your Ass Down Award.
Okay.
And it is an award, part of why I call this At Our Table is because, it's really an homage to my grandparents because at our table, our Sunday table, we had the major discussions, heartfelt discussions. Sometimes it would be heated. Sometimes it'd be, a lot of laughing and joy. But at our tables where the big things would be decided. But sometimes when you got a little too big for your britches, my grandfather would say, boy, you better sit your ass down. And so at the end of every episode, we provide a Sit Your Ass Down award. We allow our guests to present who they want this week to present the Sit Your Ass Down award.
Who I'm supposed to do that to?
So,
my goodness.
Now, Clyburn, when he interviewed, he in his Southern gentleman, Jim Clyburn, he's like, now, Jamie, I'm not going to do that. But you can't cop out like Clyburn. We need you to present.
Okay, so let me just say, it wouldn't be an individual.
Yeah, that's fine.
It would be the billionaire class that is trying to purchase our democracy and divide our country. They need to sit their ass down.
I love it. Mayor. all you billionaires out there, you know who you are.
Exactly.
All of you are hanging out in Mar-a-Lago. Sit your ass down.
Exactly. Democracy should not be purchased.
Well, Mayor, I've really, really enjoyed having this time with you. And being in your fabulous city. I love coming out here to LA. And a lot of folks were very good to me here when I ran for the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have just been such a joy, and I'm so proud of you and what you have done
Thank you.
and the transformations that you are making in the city. And you're right. You have not, you still have a lot of work that you want to do, but you are on that right path to really transforming LA and making it, the amazing city that it really is.
And by the way, we're all extremely proud of you, shepherding the entire Democratic Party through such difficult times.
There's a reason why I don't have hair.
Yeah, but it's wonderful to see you as a free man.
The freedom is nice. The freedom is nice. And now I think sometimes my kids wish I was back on the road a little. Like, when are you going again? Because you need to go.
I bet.
Yeah, but it's been a joy. But thank you again, Mayor. Thank you for being at our table. Looking forward to coming back here to LA again soon and to helping you on your reelection next year.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, be sure to subscribe to our Substack on jamieharrison.substack.com. At Our Table with Jamie Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hyder and Jamie Harrison. Our producers are Kyle Kelly and Emily Harrell. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Lauren Brown. Courtney Reimer of Sounds Great Strategies is our creative consultant. Neil Rossini of FWRV LLP provides production legal. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. We recorded this episode at Our House Studios in downtown Los Angeles. Very special thanks to Mayor Karen Bass and her team. I'm Jamie Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.